Hey scholars, Miss Coleman here. We are in my home office at the moment, which I just kind of started finishing setting up. So this is where you'll see my videos from now on. It's a little different than what you've seen, but here we are. So today we're talking about a young nation is born. So yesterday on Thrilling Thursday, you heard all about how the war ended, how the British surrendered at Yorktown, and now that's it, the Revolutionary War's over. So what comes next? They've been freed. Do they know how hard it is to lead? They're on their own. Awesome. Wow. Do we have a clue what happens now? So as you can tell by the title and my singing, this is all about what happens after the war. So the war is finished. We won. We were victorious. What happens next? We're going to find out. Happy Fantastic Friday. Let's get started. We'll go over our vocab at-bats. I have some updated scholar shout-outs. We'll do the objective, go over new vocabulary words, do the read aloud, check our understanding, and I'll walk you through a couple of written things you can do at home, okay? All right, vocab at-bats. Who's got the word? Most of the cities in the United States were once confident. Most of the cities in the United States were once surrendering. Most of the cities in the United States were once wilderness. What is the word? 3, 2, 1. Most of the cities in the United States were once wilderness. They were once wilderness. White flags were a sign the British were confident at Yorktown. White flags were a sign the British were surrendering at Yorktown. White flags were a sign the British were wilderness at Yorktown. 3, 2, 1. White flags were a sign the British were surrendering at Yorktown. It was a sign that they'd given up, they'd lost the fight. General Cornwallis felt confident he could defeat the militia. General Cornwallis felt surrendering he could defeat the militia. General Cornwallis felt wilderness he could defeat the militia. Which is it? 3, 2, 1. General Cornwallis felt confident. He was so certain that he could defeat the militia and win the war. And as we learned last time, that's not what happened. All right, scholar shout-outs. Who have I heard from? Who have I seen work from? Let's see. ISU Redbirds. I've spoken to some parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles. I still have not gotten any pictures of work from ISU scholars. Send me those pictures of your work, okay? And for Ashford, we have 2. There are 2 scholars from Ashford that I have seen pictures of work from, so keep going, Ashford. ISU, I'd love to hear from you guys, okay? Objective, objective, we learn all about it. I can write one sentence about one important thing George Washington did to serve the United States. So we already know he served as our commander-in-chief and won the war at Yorktown. We're going to learn a little bit more about what he did after that. Time for vocabulary words. The first word you need to know is capital. The first word you need to know is capital. Capital is a city that is the center of government for a state or country. A city that is the center of government for a state or country. The capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. The next word you need to know is permanent. The next word you need to know is permanent. Permanent means lasting forever, not expected to change. The rules of football are permanent and don't change from game to game. The players might change, the teams might change, but the rules stay the same. The next word you need to know is president. The next word you need to know is president. President is the person in charge of a country or an organization. The person in charge of a country or organization. The President of the United States is elected every 4 years, and of course I have President Barack Obama pictured right here. The next word you need to know is united. The next word you need to know is united. United means combined into one. Combined into one. The team members formed a united group against their opponents. That's it for vocabulary. All right, so what happened at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781? Washington and the French trapped General Cornwallis. The British surrendered. They gave up. They were done fighting. The war ended. The colonists were no longer ruled by the British king. The world turned upside down, it seemed. Who did the colonists ask to be the new king? Who did they ask? Shout out if you know. That's right, they asked George Washington to be their new king. But what did he say? Shout out what he said. 3, 2, 1. He said, no way. He said, I didn't defeat George III to become George I. We just fought against a king. We don't need another king. We heard the mention of George Washington's wife. Who remembers her name? 3, 2, 1. Her name was Martha. At the end of the war, Washington went home to Mount Vernon to be with his wife and their children and grandchildren. He thought he'd had enough. He was like, I'm done. I've served my country. I did my part. So now we're going to find out what happened next. After the war, he went back to Mount Vernon. I want you to listen carefully to find out what happened to him next and how it impacted the founding of our country, all right? For the first few years after the Revolutionary War ended, the former British colonies could not agree on anything. They had not yet come up with a name for themselves. Some said they should be called the Union of States. Others liked the sound of the American nation. Others simply wanted to call themselves with the names of the states in which they lived. Virginians if they lived in Virginia, New Yorkers if they lived in New York, and so on. There was no plan for how they would be governed or ruled, so lots of different people were making up lots of different rules. States were taxing one another unfairly, just like the British had done before the war. What a big mess! George Washington was enjoying his life at Mount Vernon with his wife, their children, and grandchildren. At 57, he felt that he had served his country well as commander-in-chief, and he was not looking for any more jobs away from his farm. But 4 years after returning home from the Revolution, Washington was called to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for another big meeting. Ooh, I recognize some of the people in this picture. I recognize George Washington. I also recognize Benjamin Franklin. Ooh, this is your chance to text me. If you know who that third person is, we have George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. If you know who that third person is, have mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, someone text me who that third person in this picture is. If you do that, it's an extra Grow Our Team point because that's how I know you watched my video. Washington joined many of the same men with whom he had worked in the Continental Congress at the beginning of the war. These men are called our founding fathers, or simply founders, because they helped found or start our new country. Benjamin Franklin, now 81 years old, was the oldest representative there. George Washington was elected president of the convention or meeting, so he was in charge of this large meeting. He was the president of this large meeting. He's not the president of the country, he's the president of the meeting. Or I should say he's not the president of the country yet. Stay tuned. It was called the Constitutional Convention because the men were writing a constitution, a plan for the new nation so they could all live together peacefully. Do you remember how Washington said they needed to come up with a plan of how to rule the country without a king? Well, these men were meeting to come up with that plan, which we now call the Constitution. Stop arguing, George Washington told the men. We have an important job to do. It was hard work. They met for 4 long, hot months, from May to September. The men continued to argue. Some walked out, but most of them stayed until they came up with a really good plan, or a constitution. Their hard work paid off. The rules they wrote that summer more than 200 years ago are the ones we still use today. And when our founding fathers left Philadelphia that September, our country had a new name. We, the people of the United States, they wrote. United means combined together into one. So now all the states have come together. They're united in a single nation. They're a united nation. From then on, the 13 former British colonies were called the United States of America. One thing the representatives discussed that summer was their need for a leader. They decided that a president chosen by the people to serve for only a few years would be better than a king who was not elected and served for his entire lifetime. And guess who they wanted to lead them as their first president? You guessed it, George Washington. Once again, he had wanted to settle down at Mount Vernon, but once again, he had been called to serve his country. In 1789, when George Washington left his home in Virginia to become the first president of the United States, he had no idea what he was going to do. As the president of the new country, he knew that his presidency would set an example for all future presidents. While president, Washington stayed very busy. He helped organize a permanent national army and navy and set up a national banking system. So if something's permanent, it means that it will not go away. It's long lasting. Today, we still have a national army and a navy. As president, George Washington lived first in New York City and later in Philadelphia. He worked hard on plans for a city that would be our nation's capital. George Washington personally chose the capital site along the Potomac River on land that is between Maryland and Virginia. A capital city is the city where leaders gather to govern the entire country. The word capital also means uppercase letter. What we're looking at in this picture is our capital city, Washington, D.C., and how it looks today. The capital city would not be in any state, so no state could say that it was in charge of the country. The Capitol was designed to have a house in which the president and his family would live. It would also have many government buildings. George Washington was no longer president when the capital city was finally built, but the city was named in his honor. It is called Washington, D.C. D.C. stands for District of Columbia. After serving as president of the United States for 8 years, George Washington packed up and headed home to Virginia. He died at Mount Vernon at the end of 1799. About 2.5 years later. A patriot, a founder of our nation, a military commander, and our first president, Washington has rightly been called the father of our country. Many places have been named for him. Monuments and statues have been built in his honor. You can even find his picture on our money, both on paper and on coin. George Washington is on the $1 bill and the quarter, pictured here. And that's it for today. That's how we got our Constitution or rules and how George Washington came to be our first president. So now it is time to check our understanding. What did George Washington do after the war? What did he do after the war? I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to talk with a mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, sibling, or just shout out, what did George Washington do after the war? All right. If Washington loved Mount Vernon so much, why do you think he left to go to Philadelphia and eventually became president? Ooh, this is a perfect one to talk to someone about. Why do you think he left to go to Philadelphia and eventually became president? I'm going to give you 15 seconds on this. 15, 14, 13. Why did Washington think it was important to have a permanent army and navy? Why do you think he felt it was important to have those things? 10 seconds. In this read aloud, Washington was called the father of our country. Why do you think he's referred to this way? Why do you think he's referred to this way? 15, 14, 13. All right, this is where I want to hear your thoughts. If you had the chance to meet George Washington, what would you say to him or ask him? What would you say to him or ask him? This is your chance to text me your answer and get on that shout out board, okay? Have someone text me, or if you have your own phone, ask mom, dad, grandma, grandpa to give you my number so you can text me yourself, okay? All right, time to make another caption. Now, this one you get your choice of picture of which one you're writing a caption for. This was also supposed to be a restate answer exit ticket. So I'm going to walk you through restate answer. I do have pictures of what the paper's supposed to look like. If you don't have the paper, that's okay. Just use plain notebook paper, all right? Plain notebook paper is just fine with me. So time to make a new caption. So here are your two choices for a caption. Here's picture number 1. You see George Washington at the surrender at Yorktown accepting the British defeat. So here's picture number 1. You can write a caption about George Washington served his country by leading us to victory at Yorktown. Okay, that's one option you have. Here is Washington at the Constitutional Convention telling the men to stop fighting, to calm down, and to focus on a good plan to govern our new nation. So this is what it was supposed to look like. So if you want to write about Yorktown, here is your restate. If you want to write about Yorktown, here is your restate. At Yorktown, Washington helped our country by So if this is the picture you want to write a caption for, this is where you're going to pause the video. You're going to pause the video and you're going to use your best penmanship to copy the restate you see here. And then you're going to send me a picture of that restate and answer, not just the restate. You got to make sure you have your answer, okay? So picture 1, at Yorktown, Washington helped our country by Here's picture number 2. This one has a few more words. At the Constitutional Convention, George Washington helped our country by Again, if this is what you want to write a caption for, pause it, get your plain notebook paper, or if you have this paper, that's fine too, and write your caption, your restate answer caption. Again, if you want to write about the Constitutional Convention, perfect time to pause. All right, so those are your choices. I really, really, really want to see your pictures on this. You also have all weekend, okay? That's it for today. Happy Fantastic Friday. Have someone text me your thoughts on what you would say or ask George Washington if you could meet him, and then have someone text me a picture of your written response. At Yorktown, George Washington helped our country by this, or at the Constitutional Convention, George Washington helped our country by So I want a picture of one of those. You guys have a great, wonderful, sun-filled weekend. Get your captions to me, okay? I want to see your writing. All right? Stay safe, stay healthy. I miss you. Bye.